Welcome to Making Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia, and today is January 20th, 2014. Today I'm interviewing Professor Bob Resnick, Professor of Psychology at Randolph-Macon College since 1996, and he is also a clinical psychologist. Professor Resnick, can you tell us a bit about your professional background and how you happened to come to Randolph-Macon?
Well, it's kind of the story of a poor kid making good. I am the first one of my extended family to ever attend college and was fortunate enough to get into an interest in psychology, which was a fluke to begin with. I got into psychology because I needed a class that met on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10, and the only class that was open was general psychology, and that's how it became a major. And went on and got a master's and doctorate. I came to Randolph-Macon the first time as a result of my doctoral training at the University of Tennessee. I was very good friends with another former professor here, Bill Jennings, and he was coming here and I was going to the Medical College of Virginia down in Richmond. And the chair then, Noble McEwen, was diagnosed with spinal cancer and he had difficulty standing. So literally shortly before I came to Richmond, Bill had already come to Ashland, and he called and said, would you be willing to teach a course or two at the college because our chair cannot teach? And I said, sure, because I didn't have a license to practice yet, and so extra income would have been appreciated. So I was here for 3 years maybe. I taught at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. I do not teach at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock since that time.
Was that in the 60s?
I came in 68, and I think I was here till 1970 the first time. Luther White was president. Noble McEwen was the chair. Bill Jennings had just come. And because I was in and out, I don't think I recall anyone else in the department beside Mac, Noble McEwen, Mac as it was called, and Bill. And I did that for those 2 years. And then got in my car and drove on down to the medical college and did that. Then they recruited a couple of other people because Mac was sadly terminal. And that's when I stopped. Which coincidentally was the time when I was able to get my license to practice. I had enough postdoctoral experience. And so I was here for the 2 years, went to some faculty meetings. Then they were at night.
Right.
7 to 10-ish. I mean, they really went on.
And in the Mullen boardroom, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
It was.
Uh-huh.
It was. And so...
And cigar smoke, I understand.
I don't remember the cigars,
You don't remember?
but I do know we had to leave the Mullen boardroom because we were violating fire regulations. Had too many people in the room.
Yes.
So we had to vacate that place. The first time that I was here, it was also the time when they were talking about going co-ed.
Yes.
Prior to that time, there were a few local women attending, but nothing programmatically. And it was a great to-do. The alumni were falling on their swords, and it'll ruin the nature of the college. It'll be hellfire and damnation. And President White took some heat for that. There was, in fact, a few of the older faculty were wearing miniature leaves that were painted white leaves.
Oh, sending a message.
It was a message, and
goodness.
I didn't see a lot of them, but foolish me, I had to ask somebody what it meant.
Right. That's pretty cryptic.
Yeah, it was. So the college obviously survived not only women attending, but my leaving the first time.
And you went into private practice at that point?
At the medical school, all of us were sort of required to do private practice. Because they paid us so little, they gave us ample opportunity to do private practice. Of course, the college took a percentage of what you earned in private practice. So yeah, I got my license in 1970, and I'd already built relationships. I liked working with kids, as it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Quite by accident, actually. I didn't like kids growing up. I wouldn't even sit my elder sister's children. I thought, I won't do it. So I started working and ultimately wound up with a joint appointment in psychiatry and pediatrics through the
Mm-hmm.
7 years that I was there. So in 1996, 1995, the college came out with a retirement for senior faculty, because I was a full professor and they could pay an assistant professor half of what I was being paid. So they gave us a deal, about 15 of us left, that we would get more goodies, benefits, for me to leave in 96 than if I waited the other 10 years and took my normal retirement date at 65. It was like a no-brainer. It was
Right.
like, wow. So I'm looking for something to do. I joined a practice half-time, and I went to the University of Richmond, and I came here asking about teaching classes. I taught one semester at UR. That's a sorry, UR. I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
But that's a different story and probably not appropriate here. But I came here and I met Terry Winiger, and Terry and I were talking about how I could contribute. They didn't have a person teaching a couple of courses that I could teach, and I was looking to just kind of supplement part-time. And Terry said, let me see if I can get you a half-time position. And he went to, I think it was Lydell Payne, was president in 96. They said yes. I had to meet with Lydell, and that was terrific. And I came on half-time, and I stayed half-time for 7 years, working in my practice group half-time, playing a lot of basketball and working out. And when Carol Hughes retired, the job was advertised, and I've asked if I could apply for it, and I probably had an inside track because I was a known entity. I had 7 years of student rating scales on me from Randolph-Macon students.
Right.
And so, long story short, I took a full-time appointment here. They allowed me, the administration and legal allowed me to see patients. And after a few years, I decided here in the campus office to see patients. And
in the counseling office.
no, in my faculty office
as a private practitioner.
Yes, I had
interesting.
I had to prove that I had all the liabilities and all
yes.
that stuff. And I did a little, 4 or 5 hours a week, not much. And then it's probably been about 3 years when I inactivated my license.
Well, was there a campus counseling center at that time?
There was.
And what was that like? Did they mind that you were seeing patients in your office?
I was not seeing students from the campus. These were all private
I
patients.
See. Yes, okay.
I did on occasion, because someone called me on the faculty, had a friend or a family member wanted an ADHD workup, and so I agreed to see them. But I did do some work for a couple, 3-4 years with the Hack Center. Same thing around ADHD turning into learning disabilities, and then Jack came, and he was about as knowledgeable as I am when it came to ADHD, and so I did not do that the last couple, 3 years. So I've been here since then until May, June of this year.
So was Carol Hughes, was her specialty clinical psychology as well, or was that?
She was. It's by the quirk of licensing and training. Carol's degree was in counselor education, her PhD. She could not get licensed as a clinical psychologist. She got licensed as a professional counselor. In order to get licensed as a clinical psychologist, you have to come from uh, American Psychological Association approved program and now internship before you can get licensed in many states. So she could frankly do virtually everything that I did, but she could not call herself a psychologist.
Well, that's a great bridge you had between your clinical work and coming here and able to overlap a little bit. When you came and once you gave up the private practice after 3 or 4 years, and you were full-time teaching, can you talk a bit about the development of the department, the psychology major, and what the changes you've seen in the last
Wow.
18 years in that?
The major has gone under substantial change a couple, 3 times over. I give Kelly Lambert all the credit in the world. I could never be a departmental chair, even though I was a divisional chair at the medical school. Too much thinking going on. But under her guidance, we renovated our major 2 times clearly and modified things within the major in the periods before the major changes. General psychology was a good example. When I came here full time, so I now got into the cycle of teaching general, that was team taught. There were 3 people on each team, and we each sort of taught our special areas, so we each would teach about approximately 4.5 weeks per faculty. And that was a change that was made before I got here. After about 3 or 4 years of that, it was clear that while that was a good idea, the feedback from the students said it was more difficult for them because they had to get used to 3 different teaching styles and 3 different ways of examining. So it's gone back to one person teaching general, and people like myself and Kelly will go in and do a 1-2 hour lecture in our specialty. I did it on the abnormal psychopathology, and Kelly would do something on the neurosciences. But the course was under the purview of just one student. We've added the the RATS courses. It's a research course tied to a major course that you've taken, and we have them in 4 or 5 different areas, so the students get a hands-on experience of developing a research idea, getting it to the IRB, doing the study, writing the study up, analyzing it. And it's been a very good experience for the students, I think.
Very good training, yes.
So when I came here, Terry had me, I must say, when I got the job full-time, Terry had left, and he was at Susquehanna University as a dean. And I emailed him, and we had the standing joke. I once asked him what I should wear at a class, and I don't know if you've ever seen Terry Winiger, and he said, "You're asking me?" And he's wearing crumpled chinos, dirty running shoes, and a pullover shirt. And I was used to a jacket and tie. In fact, I still wear a tie to class. I've done that since I came here. So I emailed Terry and I said, "I'm now full-time. I just wanted to write you and thank you for giving me the opportunity all those years ago when he, instead of getting me a course here and there, he got me a half-time position." And he wrote back kind of a funny answer. And he says, "I didn't do anything." I said, "You did it. I just said, sure, come on, give it a try." And that was a concern now that I think about it, because when you teach medical students, it's very different from teaching undergraduates, because every medical student already has a college degree, and they're 4 years older. And medical schools get the crème de la crème, but it turned out not to be a problem, thankfully. But I had 27 years of rich clinical experience, and that's what I used in my classes to enrich the content. was to say, well, yeah, I did. I've worked with several obsessive compulsive. Let me tell you about my teenager who was a double toucher, and we can talk about that.
Right.
And that's and the students' reviews have consistently said that that really helped make the book material alive. It's even better than the videos.
That you would have, right, you'd have that experience to
And they
bring.
could say, well, then what happened? And I could tell them, but on a video,
Yeah.
I could only guess.
Right, right. And especially in a topic like abnormal psychology, it's interesting to have some experience firsthand. Well, what were some of the important issues facing the college at the time, the last, your second time here?
Second time here. Well, let me think. There was, well, we came through two presidents in that time. Actually, this is, Bob is the third.
Right, because you came under Liddell Payne.
Right.
And he was probably only here a couple of years before you left.
Right.
I mean, before he left.
Right. Then Rusty came and spent
6 years.
6 years. And then Bob came. What I remember, Liddell, I love talking to him because he's got a funny story just about anything. Rusty was a little more serious. And although he was the only president who came to my office. In fact, it was my office was in the basement of Smithy, and that was during the years when we had the Winter Kid. I've forgotten his name. He was
yes, the young, the
yeah,
10-year-old
10-year-old,
who came,
yeah.
yes. Greg Smith?
Greg Smith, yes, that's his name.
Yes.
And he just walked by and said, "Do you have a minute?" Sure. And he was really concerned about how this 10-year-old was going to do among 18 to 20-year-olds who have a lot of hormone rushing that this 10-year-old hasn't started yet. So we had a very interesting, lengthy discussion about things we could look for and things that could be done to make his transition easier. And it turns out he did fine. In fact, I knew students who were combined psychology and biology majors, whatever one of his majors was, and they always wanted to be his lab partner.
Oh, it's probably very focused.
Yes, very focused, get it done.
Yeah.
And he did very, very well, but I was impressed that Rusty thought, well, this is not usual. Let me see if Resnick knows anything about it.
Yeah, good. He was drawing on the experience he had right on campus. That's good. Can you talk a bit about your activities and experience in college governance or other service at the college? You alluded a little bit to the ADD testing type thing, but anything else?
I did work for years with the Hack Center, gave guest lectures in some of the education courses, and again, focusing on the ADHD and LD relationship, when they're the same, when they're not the same, what do they look like, how are they treated. Was on the, I don't remember exactly what it was called, but I was on the guest speaker list. And I did a few of those lectures, and I don't know if that program just kind of stopped or what I said I could provide was no longer of interest. And shortly after I came on full time, I was asked to join the IRB.
Yes, let's talk about that a bit. Yeah.
The Institutional Review Board is a federal mandate that all human subject research has to be reviewed for the protection of the human subjects, and particularly if they are vulnerable populations, minors, handicapped, or other. So there's a formal review that has to be done. You have to show what you're going to do, why you're going to do it. You show your release form, your feedback form, even down to if you think the subjects are going to be upset, giving them contact numbers. Like we give them a counseling center, and I have the researchers in my class give them their email as well. So that has to go through a review that makes sure that the subjects are protected, and that they are They understand what they're signing and what they have to do. And one of the most important things is that the subject can opt out at any moment in time during the study without penalty. Right. And so that's what we did. I was on it for, I don't know, 2 years, and I was then asked to chair it. And one of the things that I did as chair that's even gotten better with the new chair is the turnaround in getting the IRBs done. We do ours electronically, so that we can turn it around in 3 to 5 days if there's not a problem, and if there is, then we'll meet and see what the problems are. Other schools, it's all paper. They meet once a month. I had a student who wanted to do a comparison study of freshman depression among Randolph-Macon and UR, and we were able to turn it around in 4 or 5 days, and turns out she had to redesign the study because at that time it may have changed. Richmond had a monthly meeting. Right. So it could be 6, 7 weeks before you would hear.
If you just missed the meeting.
And that's exactly what happened. So we streamlined it. We streamlined the forms. Now there's another person who's taken over. Once I decided to retire, I thought it would be better for me to step away from that and let someone else come in. And I'm blanking on her name. She's in sociology, and she's done a phenomenal job.
Amy Armenia?
Yes, thank you, Amy Armenia. And she has taken it much further than I have. I mean, she really got it even smoother. So for us, it's fairly simple because we're not dealing with dangerous drugs and injecting things and so on. Yeah. But you have to make sure that everybody's okay with the study. You know, as Kelly says, you know, that's why she likes working with critters. You know, they're always around because human research, you know, that's what I tell my students, 12 people were supposed to be here, only 3 showed up. Welcome to human research.
Right.
Because you have to wait for them to come. You just can't go downstairs and take them out of the cage.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for that. Can you talk a bit about how your interest in ADHD and related learning disabilities grew in your research?
Well, it's ironic because at my doctoral training program, I didn't want to work with kids, had no interest in kids. And Bob Waller, who was the kind of head of the child section in the psychology clinic at the University of Tennessee, everybody had to see 2 children. That was required. And I remember those 2 little girls as fresh as it was yesterday. And my supervisor saying, "You're a natural." You're a natural with kids. And I would say, yes, because I've never really grown up, which is probably true. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, enjoyed it more than when I was working with adults. So an internship, when I got there, at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, graduate school, Knoxville, Medical Center, Memphis,
just a little bit apart.
You know, 425 miles. So we moved down there for that year. And I did a child's specialty at the UT Medical Center, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And when I came here, I came to medical college as a child specialist, ultimately getting a secondary appointment in pediatrics. And then, as a quick sidebar, I found out why I didn't get it earlier is because I didn't ask.
Oh.
When I said, "Gee, I do a lot of work in peds. Can I get a because there's no money involved, just a secondary appointment?" And he said, "Oh, sure." Yeah. And I had it 5 months later. Should have sooner. So I directed an adolescent inpatient psychiatric program. Spent 10 years half-time at Virginia Treatment Center for Children, which is part of the medical school. So it was all kids. And on the health psychology side, I worked mostly with pediatric gastroenterologists and pediatric endocrinologists, help kids get ready for surgery, talk about, you know, I actually worked with some pediatric dentists using hypnosis on some kids so they could pull these teeth. And, well, it's a much more involved story that needs to be told here, but I did a lot of the health psychology stuff, so I essentially got retreaded as a health psychologist, and that's what I've been teaching here every year since I came in
Health
'96.
psychology.
Health psychology.
Mm-hmm.
The course hadn't been taught in 3 or 4 years, and I taught it at least once a year, and once in a while, twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I'm thinking about since 1996 to the present. That is the period of time I think of when ADHD was beginning to be very recognized and diagnosed.
Yes.
Quite, the increase of diagnosis was increasing rapidly in that time, and treatment, and I wonder how that impacts your background, your students, or do you see a lot more awareness among your Randolph-Macon students and treatment and that sort of thing?
Oh, it's a long tale to tell. I got into ADHD because my son had it. Now, ADD, ADHD didn't come into language until 1980. Steve was born in '69. So he had it, and nobody could tell me what it was, excuse me, including EEGs and all kinds of tests, and he just was floundering. And child neurologist and I were talking about where to go with this evaluation, and he's from South Africa, and I can't quite do that accent, but he says, Bob, if you're only hyperactive, I would know what to do. And I said, Ed, I'm desperate. Let's pretend he's hyperactive. And he put him on low dose of methylphenidate, Ritalin. Didn't tell the teacher, called the teacher a couple of days later, and she said, Dr. Resnick, I don't know what you're doing, but don't stop. So he was in the early cadre of non-hyperactive ADD kids, which didn't get recognized until 1980.
Yes. Yeah.
So from him, I started an ADD clinic at the medical school. I directed that for 14 years until I left. Wrote a book on ADD in adults. I became a niche practitioner. I could have all the practice I needed or wanted doing ADHD, and I just expanded it to through the lifespan. And the book that I wrote was actually on ADD in adults. And I've seen students here as favors for people and trying to figure out what's going on. And the data is fairly clear. It's about 10% of the population, and if a workup is done properly, it won't be overdiagnosed. But many times the diagnosis is based on a 5-minute consultation with primary care physicians who need to see more patients per hour. So I don't think it's overdiagnosed. Treatment is clearly more than stimulant or other medications. The irony is even the manufacturers say that the medication should be part of a multimodal treatment plan. So I've carved a niche that's gotten me enough notoriety to be elected to national office, and it's just been a ball. And incidentally, I am an ADD adult. If you ever see me in the classroom, you never see me sitting, and you never even see me standing still unless I'm taking a quick look at the podium to look at my notes. I am continuously making a U in the classroom. And it works. In fact, my wife laughed. She said, even when you're on the phone, you're pacing. And I said, thank God for cordless phones.
Yeah.
Okay, walk back and forth, and forth. But I've been able to channel it, obviously, and so it works.
So you were able to really take a personal issue, you and your son, and convert it to professional.
Convert it into a specialization that
has benefited a lot of people, right? Yeah, excellent. Well, and you mentioned national office and the American Psychological Association. You served as president of that.
Yes, I was.
Received a Lifetime Achievement Award. Can you talk about your professional activity in that way for the record?
Well, it goes back to the early 70s. In 1972, Virginia passed a law that said if a person is licensed to provide a service, an insurance company cannot refuse to pay that professional. So we were licensed, and the insurance companies, once the law was passed, said, we don't think that's constitutional. We don't think we can be told who to pay. And the analogy that I've used, and I've talked about this in the past, it's like you or me getting a speeding ticket, and we say, no, I'm not going to pay this speeding ticket. I don't think the law is constitutional. That's what the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans did. That segued into I became a named plaintiff in a 3-year suit, known two of them actually, two suits known as Virginia Blues, that wound up going to the Supreme Court by certiorari. They had a written request, and the court refused to hear it. So we won. We won the federal suit, and we won the state suit. Simply, there was a concerted antitrust action by the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. We found evidence that the 3 plants operating in the area would collectively not pay psychologists. That's Sherman antitrust violation. That is a smoking gun.
Right.
And in the state's courts, State Corporation Commission, we got a favorable ruling saying that an insurance company can't decide not to pay somebody because they think it's not constitutional. They can try to appeal the constitutionality. So they got spanked in both courts. That kind of catapulted me into the national light, because it turned out that had we lost this plan, these laws that permitted psychologists to be paid would have been one by one knocked down. So that catapulted me into the national scene, and I was on several boards and committees of the American Psychological Association, elected to its board of directors, and ultimately in 1994-95, I was elected president of the association. Testified before Congress on multiple issues, national health, and on research for military spending. My son was in the cavalry, and he was the first to point out to me. He drove a recon vehicle, and he said, "I don't know who designed this, Dad, but you know, at night I don't see anything, but I can tell by the feel what all the controls do." And that's human engineering, which is one of the things that psychologists do in the military. So I talked about that. I worked with the military extensively, mostly Army, and I'm proud to say I'm the only psychologist to ever been awarded the Army Department of Defense's Outstanding Civilian Service Medal, which I wear a little lapel button proudly when I testified before Congress on military spending, because that they don't know what the decoration means, but they can tell by its shape it's military, and that that got me creds, as they say, right away.
Right.
So it was. I'm still active in the association. I serve on their Council of Representatives, but I've been going to the meetings probably 30 plus years, every one, and to international meetings. So it's been a great ride. If I had it to do over again, I'd jump on psychology.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, thank you for saying that. And I know sometimes people don't want to go into all of that, but I appreciate your telling us those awards and that in your service. So we have that for the record. You mentioned national health care policy and military. You would, given this is 2014 and we're in the first month of the Affordable Care Act insurance actually being in effect, and I wondered if you would speak to some of the national health care issues. I know you teach courses on health care policy, so if you wanted to speak to any of that changes you've seen.
Yeah, well, the Affordable Care Act was a bill that was going to come sooner or later. You may remember during President Clinton's, he was the first to talk about a national health care plan. The problem is several issues. We are the only industrialized country in the world that didn't have a national health care plan, the only one. If you look at the World Health Organization and their ranking of healthcare delivery systems, the United States ranks 37th. France, by the way, is number 1. The problem is that we have hundreds of payers rather than a central payer. And so you've got duplication all over the place, and you've got lots of competition. You're not going to see that change anymore. We know cigarettes are dangerous, but we didn't disband all the cigarette manufacturing companies. So the problem really is, how can you make it work with a patchwork quilt? And the thing that it probably disturbs me the most is how little people understand the Act and how they will pontificate based on no information. And one of my favorite stories was this guy, he was in North Carolina, and he got up in this meeting and he says he didn't want the federal government messing with his health care. And so the commentator said, well, how old are you, sir? And he said, I'm 66. He says, well, don't you have Medicare? And he said, yes, I do, and I don't want the government messing with it. Totally clueless. And that's the problem, and it's party politics. And no Republican governor has expanded the Medicaid part of that program. Now we have a Democratic governor, so what is he saying? I want you to expand the program. So it's all in political posturing. Sadly, the person who's thought about least is getting people health care coverage. We have to make a decision. Is health care a right in our society, or is it a privilege? Up until now, it's been a privilege. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but it is very timely that we're having this interview at this time, and that is one of your areas of expertise. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't just address that. But maybe out of the national level, more to a local level, we've also seen a lot of emphasis on mental health care and mental health awareness and treatment in Virginia, especially, and since the Virginia Tech tragedy. And I know so many colleges and universities have enacted different procedures and policies and interventions for mental health care. And I was wondering if you could talk about how Randolph-Macon fits into that, or just the culture as you see it.
Well, post the Virginia Tech shootings, virtually every college and university has set up some fail-safe systems. Sadly, apparently, from what I read, some of the fail-safe was not kicked in quickly enough at Virginia Tech, but I'll let the courts kind of decide that piece. But Randolph-Macon has it's called a siren, a campus-wide audible noise. It's got text messaging. It's got email messaging. In fact, the college, and I think very wisely, expanded that for like weather alerts.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's everybody on campus has a computer, and it'll go to their iPhones or Samsung phones, and it's an important system to have up. One you hope you never have to use, but I think there's been actually one or two cases where some male was walking around on campus, and an alert may have gone out, some unknown male. But it's a necessary thing to have, and I wish I could tell you in any intelligent terms what possesses these folks to break with reality and start shooting people at random, anywhere from the kids up in New England to Virginia Tech to Columbine. We don't know. And sadly, mental health has always been the orphan of healthcare. And it takes, again, sadly, something like what happened to the governor's son to bring it to the foreground. And hopefully, although I read now that there's already some pushing back on some of the bills that are proposed, but at least something that's been in the work for 12 years will finally happen, and that will be a master list of available psychiatric beds. Why it took 12 years? No idea. Why it did take 12 years is because of what happened to the governor-elect's son.
What will happen then, yeah.
It never would have come to the foreground, and laying moribund for a dozen years. And you think about it, well, gee, why does that not make sense? You need a bed, you can find any available bed in the state.
Right. Well, thank you. Well, just thinking a little more broadly, what do you see as some of the watershed events at the college during your time at Randolph-Macon? You could say even both times. You mentioned going co-ed happened right around the time when you were first here.
Going co-ed was a monumental change. In fact, I think we're now actually a little more females than males in our classes. first time around, because I was only there for a couple of years, a couple of classes first thing in the morning, I did not have a real feel for the college. But when I came here full time, I felt like I had done a reverse Rodney Dangerfield. I get respect.
Oh, good. That's good.
When you're in medicine's house, sometimes you don't get that respect if you're in, especially if you're in the Department of Psychiatry. And frankly, that's part of the problem that I faced when I was there. So I came here gun shy, and actually had Kelly say, "It's okay. Don't worry." He said, "You know, you only got 4.5 out of a possible 5." And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going? And she was very helpful in mentoring me in the culture of a liberal arts college, which is very different from the culture of a medical school, needless to say, and the culture of a small liberal arts school. I mean, I loved it here. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I spent a year going back and forth myself in discussion with my wife to say, 73, maybe it's time to let somebody else do this for a while. And what pushed me over the line was the new mental health diagnoses are coming out, which means I have to redo everything. You know what?
Yes.
I think there's a message in that. So I did it enough to get through this semester, but I won't have to do anything, obviously, for the fall. One of the things that I noticed is the psychology department is amazingly stable.
Interesting. Say more about that.
Since I've come here full time, there's only one person who left after being here 2 years, and she was here, and her husband was on the West Coast, and so that wasn't going to work. But other than that, everybody that, well, I stand corrected. One faculty member was killed 3 winters ago.
Oh, right, in the ice, yeah.
But Kelly's been here from the get-go, and Alva's been here from the get-go, and Kristen's been here from the get-go, and so the department has been, and people we recruited. Susan Parker's been here for 7 or 8 years. Cedar, the latest person, been here 4 years, and he's coming up on his tenure. And everybody seems to appreciate each other's differences. We do every year we have a retreat to kind of figure out what the next year is going to be like. And I've enjoyed those people so much, and apparently the people who come after me do, because none of them leave.
That's wonderful.
It's an amazing place to work.
And it's really one of the largest majors at the college too.
Yes.
I believe.
If
not the largest, it's one of the.
It's in the top 2, I think. Yes.
Yeah. Which really speaks well, and the students always have done well. When they.
But I maybe should have mentioned this earlier. One of the things that I took over when I came in full time was the psychology part of the Bassett internship program. That was fairly disorganized when I came on board, and so it's a much more organized program. There's a complete listing of programs and what the placements, or what you want to do, what you can do there, whether it's for internship or field placement or both. I have about a 30-page brochure, a booklet that I give them to all students about how you survive, how do you benefit from supervision. If you're in a medical center, some of the common phrases that you might see and not know. And so it's much more organized, and we've added many more placements. The problem is that more and more placements that I've added have a little more unique application process, and so it's getting a little bit more complicated because we've been successful.
Oh.
And our students have liability insurance, and places require that. And I had to check it with legal counsel here, and they said, yeah, they're all covered. And had to submit to St. Mary's a proof of insurance before they would sign the contract to work with our students.
Right,
yeah,
right.
So it's all good. It's been a fabulous program, and I think one of the things I'm going to have to do, at least for the first 2 or 3 semesters, is probably work with the person who's taken my slot, because the paper doesn't explain everything that you need to do.
You can transition with that, right?
Yeah, and everybody's comfortable with me hanging around.
Right. And is George Spagna taking over the Bassett internship?
He has taken over the
Program
overall
yeah.
directorship of it.
Right. But each department, I guess, has a liaison with him.
Yeah, I don't know about if every department does, but those who place a lot of students have a departmental coordinator that works with the overall director of the Bassett program. And we have 11 students out this January.
That's great. Great. Good. Well, as you look back, what were some of your most satisfying experiences at Randolph-Macon?
Well, becoming full-time was just most gratifying. And frankly, working with the people I worked with, I've never felt that I wasn't appreciated. I've never felt like I was being asked to do too much, and even found myself volunteering to do things. So personally, getting out of the high adrenaline of a tertiary care medical center into a liberal arts college, at first felt funny, but then I really started to enjoy it. I've been through 3 presidents, and I stand in awe of our current president. Boy, if he isn't a rainmaker, I don't know who is. So there's been more construction since he's been here than I can ever. Well, in all the years that I've been here, part-time, more full-time. So he's been a dynamo.
Yeah.
And he remembers everybody's name.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's name challenged, I find that just he met me once and remembered my name. The only reason I remembered his because it was the same as mine.
Well, is any other memory or story about Randolph-Macon that you'd like to share here?
Nothing comes off the top of my head. I'm sure if I had time to think about it, some stuff with students. Just so many stories about students years later will drop me an email and say, boy, I just finished my doctoral program, and I knew more about abnormal coming in than anybody.
That's great.
That was phenomenal. How risque can I get?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, so no naughty words.
Okay.
I teach a class called Psychotherapy and Personality Theory and Psychotherapy. Here's how we think personality evolves. Here's how we fix broken personalities. And one of the systems is the existential system we talk about. So I give the students an assignment, and I say, just next class, complete this sentence. Life is. And they're all reluctant to say it, and I said, all right, let me tell you what mine is. I'll tell you. And mine is, life is like a green apple. Sometimes it's bitter, and sometimes it's sweet. It gets a little chuckle. I believe that. And so we're going around the room, and one student said, a female student said, life is like sex. It's good to be on top. And that just broke up the class. I've never heard anything so funny in my life, and I do this exercise every year. I obviously did not use her name, but it was one of the funniest things I had ever heard. And she was comfortable enough in the class to say that.
Yeah.
And I think looking back at classes, I've had, I think, a really nice rapport with students. The door's always open. They can come in. Oh, I do every year in the spring. I take all of those who want to come. I invite all of these senior majors who are graduating to meet me at the railroad restaurant.
The Iron Horse?
Iron Horse, thank you. I'm terrible with names. Anything's a name I won't remember. The Iron Horse. I said, bring your IDs, and we'll sit, and we will have 2 drinks over an hour and a half or longer, and there will be food that you will eat, and you can't have more than 2. And that's become an annual thing. I've done it for about 10 years. In fact, students, as they pass, in the past, I'll start this semester saying, we going to do that thing this year? Yeah,
Yeah,
we're going to do it.
Yeah.
It'll be the final one. And even the chair said that, you know, students talk about that and looking forward to that. And he said, you didn't tell anybody you were doing that. I said, well, because you weren't invited.
No.
Just the students were.
Just the students. Oh, that's good to celebrate with the majors.
Yeah,
And the,
yeah, it's been a fun
and
thing.
it's become a rite of passage. For
Yes,
them.
it has.
Mm-hmm. That's good, in a lot of ways. Well, I'm one of the outgrowths of this project. I've been interviewing longtime faculty and staff and some alums and trustees for about 7 years, and I became interested in this story of the college desegregation story. And I wasn't planning to ask you about that because I thought, you know, you came in 96, but I see you were here in 68 and 70 briefly. So I wonder if from that time, if you remember any, you know, anything like that you could shed on the story of, when you came in the fall of 68, in the spring
Right.
of 68 is when our first African-American student graduated, and he was only here for 2 years. And he's now on the Board of Trustees, you know, Hat Payne. But in the fall of 68, we had, I think, 2 African-American students who came in, one of whom graduated. I might be wrong on the numbers, but I know that Dennis Howard, who was the first four-year African-American student, did come in the fall of 68. So I just wondered during that time if you remember anything about, you know, the racial integration on campus, or if it was such a small number that it was really not much of a story at that time. Or
I don't recall anything that during that time, but again, I was here for 2 classes and I was gone. And
right.
and so if the 2 or 3 African American students were not in my classes, I'd be frankly
Was under the radar.
Yeah, it would have been all under the radar for me. Because I mean, I literally came, taught class, 10-minute break, taught class, jumped in my car, and was back at the medical center by 10 o'clock.
Well, when you left in you taught for a couple years, 68 to 70, but when you came back in 96, the college had a very different makeup then.
Yes, yes,
Very
indeed.
different. So you certainly noticed that.
Yes.
Both, you know, racially and in the co-ed. So it was a very different school.
Oh, very different. Not only because of the co-ed, but because there had been an active attempt to recruit and keep minorities in the college, and that has been it's just a very enriching experience. It's also humbling. This is a show and tell. Again, in that class, personality and treatment, we talk about culturally sensitive therapies, and we get into discussion. You know, what defines a minority, and who and what is an ethnic minority, and how does that get defined? Because data is very clear. It's not clear in terms of what who and what a minority is. You may be a minority in one way, but a majority in another way. So are you a minority, or are you not a minority? On and on and on. And in the class, there were 3, 4 African Americans, and they all were sitting in the front row, and we're talking about this and trying to get their responses among others. And I said to them, African Americans have had an interesting history at this college. And 3 of them nodded, and the 4th one laughed. And I said, so-and-so, what's so funny? She said, I'm not an African American. And I said, I'm sorry. She said, I am an African Irish. She traced her family back to Ireland for many generations, and apparently, if you go back far enough, her ancestors were on the boat in the harbor in London when the British government immediately banned slave trading, which meant those that were in the harbor, those men were released. And so her country of origin is Ireland.
Interesting.
And so she says, I'm an Irish American. And I go, okay.
Which only proved your point.
Thank you. And that's exactly what I said. I said, that just proves the point.
Mm-hmm.
Proves the point.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know until you ask about who identifies with what, and you can't tell by looking.
Exactly. Right.
So it was a wonderful experience. I couldn't have planned it better if I wanted to.
Right. Right. That's good. Well, I've interviewed Professor Hughes twice for this project. Once just generally, and then once when I really focused on, well, the desegregation of the college, but also her experience as a student and a faculty member. And we did talk about the point at which the presence of the minorities on campus are core, so that the minorities don't self-identify so much when this is sort of a tipping point. And she was talking when she was a student, the college had not reached that tipping point.
No,
and when she came back as a faculty member, she didn't think, but she sort of witnessed that point at which minorities made up enough of the college that life was easier. And
right. It wasn't surprised to see a minority on campus.
Right,
yes.
right, yeah. So we talked some about that. So I was just interested if you had that was a great illustration you gave about that.
One of the things that I talk about changes that's happened. The college has, from 1968 to now, certainly has become, I use this term advisedly, more liberal. I mean, it's not so traditional in terms of who is trying to recruit and whom they want here. That it's somehow over time the college has understood that education is broadening and that you need to have a broad spectrum of people to make that education better, not only in the classroom but on the campus as a whole. And that's been true for not only ethnic minorities but for sexual orientation. It's sometimes it's been happening with trips and stumbles, but at least it's always been going forward.
And socioeconomic groups, I think, too, just sort of a wide experience, background geographically and all kinds of ways. I think it really enhances everyone's learning,
And I would hope the college would continue to actively support people who need a bigger financial hand to get through this experience.
Especially this day and age.
Yeah. I remember when I was an undergraduate, my father had a 7th grade education, my mother vocational high school, and I was in a freshman political science class at Syracuse University, the Maxwell School, one of the best programs in the country, but I had to take a freshman poli-sci course. And we're discussing something, and we're discussing labor unions, and my father, because he was a factory worker, needed the labor union to protect his job. So I was very pro-unions then, and going back and forth, and finally the professor says, "Mr. Resnick, why are you arguing with Miss Smith? She's agreeing with you." I didn't know the words homogeneous and heterogeneous. I had never heard them before. Needless to say, I remembered them.
Yeah.
but that's the kind of the experience that really helped me bootstrap up by getting into college. Because what I heard at home, my parents loved me dearly, and I loved them. But their academics was not something that was talked about, except my father decided that I was his son and I was going to college, having no idea what that's about since he didn't finish middle school. But I think that was certainly a broadening and eye-opening experience for me. I then took a course in vocabulary building.
Yeah.
No, I did. I took a non-credit course in vocabulary.
I think undergraduate college is a course. It's a 4-year course in vocabulary building, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I find it's sometimes surprising the number of students who'll come up and not know a word on an exam. I have to give them another word for that. But if it's in the book, it might not.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your memories of working here and your experience. and shedding light on Randolph-Macon College. And
Well, all I can say, it was just a fantastic and wonderful experience.
well, good. Well, thank you for sharing it with us and making memories.
Thank you.